this session is not for me to talk at you in any way, shape or form. The idea is that we really gather feedback from you about the journey we've undertaken over the last 12 months or so. So I'll put it into a little bit of context first of all. It was around about 12 months ago to now, maybe slightly later in the year in June, that 101, I seem to recall, head teachers or school leaders got together in this venue to discuss how we might set about addressing the UAE national agenda for 2021. So that was I suppose, the launch. At a similar time, there were workshops run by KHDA and DSIB inspectors working with specific schools to raise the profile, raise the engagement and so forth. That's been built upon in each of the subsequent What Works. So I've led some sessions. I see some familiar faces. There have been other colleagues leading sessions. And the idea today is really to gather our thoughts on what we think we might have achieved in 2015, knowing that many of us have undertaken the assessments for TIMSS and PISA. A quick review and reflection on the wider national agenda, because it's more than just TIMSS and PISA, so to make sure we're aware of the bigger picture. An opportunity then to think about how we take it forward to 2018, 2019, knowing that they, specifically to TIMSS and PISA, will be the final round of assessments before we reach that milepost, if you like. What I do have, separate to the reflection forms that you will complete, although I wonder whether you'll need to complete them because there's little that I'll be doing, you'll be reflecting on yourselves, I suppose. But I do have some data capture forms, which as we go through a few of the slides that we set up back in September, will allow you to judge where we're at in terms of each of those. There should be a USB there. So I'll take the time now for you to have a look at these. I printed 25. I'm quick scan. Should be one for everybody, I hope. If not, if people don't mind sharing and collating their thoughts on each one. What I'll do, I'll take you through some of the slides that we shared back in September, so the launch of this academic year, an opportunity to reflect on what we have achieved and what we need to do next to build upon that success. Yeah, we can have it at the end, or if you want to take it now. And like terrible planning, I forgot to keep a copy for myself. So if I borrow one for reference, yeah, too eager to hand them out. Thank you very much. Okay, so we started back in June of last year, and then in our first What Works of this season, of this year, I stood, I think, in this room and shared this presentation, trying to inform and to launch some collaboration between schools to address the aspects of the agenda. What I will do, I will just remind people briefly of slides, stop every 3 or 4 slides, and then ask you, if you don't mind, it really is about capturing your thoughts. Whether your awareness is higher than it was this time last year, what has succeeded in your schools, what has succeeded as a result of What Works, what we could do better, what we need to sustain in the long term. So it really is an opportunity for us to capture your feedback towards this UAE, this national agenda, this national initiative. Okay, so I'll step you through it, I suppose, as quickly as I can. So we launched with sharing the idea of the national agenda and where it was in terms of significant milestones and timelines for the UAE. So we're all familiar with Expo 2020. 2021, we'll see the 50th anniversary of the UAE as a nation. As we all know, 2021, we have these ambitious targets. I suppose the most well-known are those linked to TIMSS and PISA, but there are wider agenda items than that. So this year in the DSIB framework, the inspection framework, inside the front cover that everybody will have received, there was this. So first thing for you to, I suppose, reflect upon, slides 1, 2, 3. If you wouldn't mind talking amongst yourselves, capturing thoughts about how much better informed you feel about the the national agenda as a whole. So really, have a discussion, 5 minutes amongst your tables, and if you can capture your thoughts in the handouts you can give them. And if there aren't one per person, please just annotate them on the same one because they'll be collected in the end. So the first one, just to comment on your awareness of the UAE National Agenda 2020. Is there anybody here who really isn't aware of the National Agenda or doesn't feel well informed? So if you could comment how well informed you feel about the aspects of the National Agenda. Second category, those of you who've attended What Works sessions during the last 12 months, whether they've had any impact upon you, and what should we be doing to raise awareness further?
You're leading it.
Either reflect anything in the school or jointly discuss it. Okay. Targets for 2015. You've got the ones for 2018 as well. They will be revised, possibly based on. Very well. That's right. It's amazing. 12 months ago, this is all about the journey. People feel more informed now. Do they feel more engaged, more involved? What are they using it? Think about it in their schools. So that's the idea. So yes, we are more informed. Were we as well informed 12 months ago? Were we as well informed in 2009 when we did the ranking? So that's the thing, that we're in a better place now. And how do we use that momentum to move forward? So you're absolutely right. If we're not informed right now, we should be working through it. Both the sessions and I think school inspections was voluntary. So if we note all of these points down, these are the things we want to find back on as to what has led you the important. Perfect, thank you. If I can help you, you're welcome. Oh, right, I'll sit down what it is then. It's World Cup and possible World Cup opportunities and chances. Ah, okay.
From where, sorry? From the press, from the media. From the media? Yeah. Oh my goodness. But fear not, we're not here to, we're not here for school. Yes, that's us.
Yeah.
That's us. What we do is we as a magazine, we focus on the environment and we look at environmental health issues. So for us, something like national agenda is from a social and environmental health perspective. So that's one of the campaigns.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, I'll move us onwards because there are a few slides to go through. The next one I think is probably the most or the next session set probably most valuable to us. In that the meeting I mentioned where we had 101 school leaders and we gave some feedback downstairs in the auditorium, the feedback pointed to these as our priority needs. What we're doing here, collaborating, sharing the process, that we don't do this as schools in isolation, it's bigger than that. There was a sense that actually one of the core skills we need to be focusing on was reading, because of the impact that also has on other learning areas. And there was a correlation between the improvement in, for every 1 point increase on the scale in reading, we have a 0.8 natural causal impact on improvement in science and a 0.6 natural impact on mathematics, irrespective of the learning in those areas. So reading was seen as a real profound need to address. And reading for fun as well as reading for, I suppose, for planned learning, if you like. That we were actually getting students to engage as readers, not be told that they need to be reading. One of the biggest requests, I suppose, was exemplar material. This is an interesting point because in the long term, there was much suggestion around it not being dependent on exemplar material and teaching to the test. But we had a different need planning for 2015, current in the short term, versus planning for 2018, 2019 and beyond. So do you think you're prepared in terms of material that suited your planning for the current round of assessments, and what needs to be done in future years for, say, the next round? Important points of 2018, 2019, even though it's 2021 is the national agenda, the ultimate aim. That will be the last round of assessments. By the time we get round to PISA in the 2021 cycle, it will happen in that year. The results won't be known until 2022 or 2023. So really, the next round in both PISA and TIMSS are critical. The importance of leadership, you look around us, if I heard a comment here, we should all in this room be very well informed now. If we're not, it would be a concern. It's whether all leadership or within the Emirates are engaged, or is it the same for you? How do we reach out and engage with those that maybe aren't as well informed as maybe we are? And again, linked to what's worked and beyond that, how do we develop this professional leadership community? Has it been effective? How do we become more effective? So again, mentioned the immediate and the long term. Your thoughts now on those comments. The immediate needs we were suggested in that session back in June, and the planning for the immediate and the long term. So take a moment just to review those. Interesting. What have we done well? What have we achieved? What has worked well at our school level? What can we apply? And what do we need to do for future success? So again, back over to you. If anybody wants me to go back to the previous slide, just raise your hand. If at any time you want to share anything, it doesn't need to be just captured on paper. Should you wish to voice anything or particular experience you have, please just speak up. Share your thoughts.
So that's what he's come from the perspective of environmental health. So we started a campaign on indoor air quality. Carried out a lot of studies in the US. Correlation between air quality, noise control,
So when you're talking about noise,
yes, that would be one of the ways that includes noise coming from students. We also look at the electromechanical systems, the air conditioning, it's about creating an ambient for optimal and also, in Dubai we have 130,000 existing schools. This one is all
That was exactly what these will be set in September. So what we're trying to get for you is
that's happening. New buildings here, but existing buildings are also in the process.
I'd just ask for us to pause for a moment. If there are any comments that people want to share, Dolly's just mentioned, bearing in mind these were targets we set ourselves back in September, that we should have, on point 3, not just only raised staff awareness, but raised parent awareness. And I think that was part of the message this morning with Test for Good, that there has been engagement with parents, or at least an attempt to engage with parents. But please do record it down. Any thoughts you have, anything you might want to share now with the wider group, because I do think all these points are valid and where we need to continue with the engagement process. So anything you want to say out loud, please feel free to. Any groups want to comment on anything that has gone well or needs to be developed? This group has been quite.
I think always local. I'm just thinking on the long term, David. When we've got 2 cycles to go through here. Yeah. The feedback from this cycle, we might be waiting 2 or 3 years for it. Is there any way we can get some interim feedback? Because otherwise, there's going to be a lag time where we're actually quite dead in the water. And at the moment, we're creating impetus at the moment, creating energy towards this, and then we're going to have a 2-year gap waiting for some feedback on the current examination outcomes. Is there any way at all we can get some interim feedback?
I think we need to talk to people like
That's what I'm saying.
gentlemen on my right, your left, is because of the lag they come through OECD and so forth, we have to wait on other agencies, but could we do something ourselves? Collaboration across schools, that we openly share data annually in a similar sort of assessment. Would that be too onerous for schools? Could it be done at school level where you have your own assessments but we moderate them in terms of benchmark standards? I think there are ways that we could address this so that we get, it's like there's no point waiting for information 2 years, the moment it's gone. You can do very little with it.
But we need some immediate feedback.
Yeah, so I think definitely something we could discuss. I know with one of the targets that were on the earlier slides around Arabic, raising Arabic proficiency, that there is in the MOE schools an annual assessment now conducted by ACER, I believe, and they're getting timely feedback on trying to raise the standards in Arabic. It's still in discussion, but there's nothing similar for PISA, TIMSS, PIRLS, and the like. So maybe
I
this.
was thinking about something as simple as an app with a self-marking test where
Yeah.
it actually does the crunching for us.
It's the funding problem, isn't it? Whether it becomes school.
Well, I'm sitting in the right place to mention that.
School funded, or whether it be. I think Dr. Abdul will probably make an exit quite swiftly. But it's a valid point, definitely, that I think the time lag is one of the biggest problems. The other one, of course, is the snapshot that you're getting a sample of students which you then need to interpret based on that sample. Should we as schools be getting a wider sample of all of our students, because you're very much sample dependent. But so I think the assessment and feedback is a big big topic for us to discuss. Is there anything else that people would like to?
Absolutely, because we were thinking as we've done the TIMSS and we haven't had a collective feedback on the TIMSS test, you know, and I think schools getting together in a forum like this would be very good to address the issues that have come with our TIMSS, that we've seen the type of questions and are we preparing and how are schools preparing, and also looking at some kind of standardized Arabic assessments, because in the absence of not having a kind of standardized, any kind of standardized, like our schools, we don't know about standardized Arabic assessments, and I know schools here may have the same kind of an issue. So getting together to see what can be done in terms of having a standardized Arabic assessment.
I think,
So
again,
those-
Valerie, because one of the points was beyond TIMSS and PISA, it is looking at raising the standards in Arabic. So we do need to look beyond TIMSS and PISA, but also at the date of TIMSS and PISA. I note them all down. We'll have a session, I think, in early June, where I need to present all of your recommendations to KHDA and to What Works. So the idea is to gauge your feedback so that we can actually make a difference, give you feedback, give you support where possible next year. We won't be able to do much, I guess, between now and then, but if we can synthesize all of your feedback, the most valid points will be taken forward, definitely. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or people would like to echo those sentiments before we move on?
Just to add to what colleague here has mentioned is, clearly raising standards in Arabic is a key priority, along with raising attainment in TIMSS and PISA and PIRLS and all the other standardized assessments. And obviously developing the quality of teaching and learning, quality of curriculum, instruction, quality of assessments that needs to develop parallel. And clearly at some point in time we need to develop maybe a national assessment system. So at some point in time, at various year groups, so we would take year 2, year 6, follow the national curriculum, follow another curriculum standardized assessment pattern, but have students take these tests at year 2, year 6, year 8, and year 10. And these are this data is nationally collected, which then provides immediate feedback. So it's not again very detailed, but provides feedback within a specific time frame, so that we can, again, you know, when you're doing your school improvement plan, you're doing your action plan, you can feed back into it and say, okay, hang on, so, you know, a range of our students were able to use the following Arabic grammar expressions, and effectively they were able to use the pronouns effectively, they were not able to use the Arabic pronouns effectively. Let's work with it. Something even very similar to the spelling, punctuation, and grammar, which is deriving from the national curriculum. So it needs to set in, and it will then provide quality feedback.
Correct.
100% agree. I think there's a consensus, and I know there are groups out there. One I know of is Avant Assessment, who are trying to address something like this, but it's applying their assessment model to the local standards, if you like, the MOE standards, and getting the assessment model right. But also they need to be in discussion with people like KHDA or the ministry to get it ratified. But I think the need is absolutely...
For international schools alike, you know, so I mean, obviously because...
It's just that standard, that
yes,
benchmark that we can all...
benchmark,
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. I'll move on, but please, and if everybody agrees, put this down so I can say it's coming through loud and clear that everybody wants this greater urgency of feedback, whether we do it locally or through other means, and to address the Arabic situation as well. I'll move on just in the interest of time, if people don't mind. The final sections are probably the easiest for us to address, and I will labour least over them. Really, people's awareness of TIMSS and PISA specifically, and asking the questions, what did you do in your schools for the short term, the most recent assessments? What have you done, or what are you considering doing in the longer term, so that we can then share best practice in sessions like these, or possibly with schools that aren't as well engaged as yourselves, to raise the bar across Dubai and the wider UAE. So, slides 9 and 10, it asks, did your school review their PISA and TIMSS targets? What did you then do with the information? Well, I suppose the first question is answered already. You wouldn't be here probably if you weren't doing anything about it. but actually what did you do about it? Because there might be some creative solutions out there, aspects around curriculum modification, preparation, cohort identification, I suppose generating a real context for learning that we're not teaching to the test. We're actually looking at the type of question that was there and building that into our curriculum as a natural part of our curriculum rather than teaching students as if this were a test unrelated to anything else they do. So what have you been doing in your schools that you think have worked, and what will you be doing in the future as we look towards 2018 and 2019? I think this is the most interesting part. This will be the bits that we will take forward, as well as the concerns that have been raised, the successes or the ideas that people have in this spirit of sharing what has been working, what has worked, and what do you think would work better. So if I can just leave you, the last session will be around, I'll go through the slides slowly, but your thoughts and observations on the practice in your school and what we could either model or improve upon. Much there of what I've spoken about already, so I won't until. So it's really, what have you done with this data? Broken it down into the subdomains, so for the strands, if you like, the more detail. What have you done with that sort of data? I do remember this was a reflection on a slideshow prepared for September 2014, so I imagine we're all very familiar with these now and much better prepared. But what journey have we taken from seeing these the first time around to where we are now and where we're going? It is, I suppose, the key question. Some thoughts there.
Learning about that.
There are a few good points that I just want to echo. Can I urge you, please, to record, scribe, even what you think is the most obvious things that you've been doing in your school. A lovely comment from the far corner that just talking to students after the assessments to find out how they found them, what problems they faced, were they well prepared, were the questions different to what they'd encountered elsewhere. So just seeking immediately that student feedback might seem obvious to many of us, but it's something that definitely we should share with other colleagues and share more widely in schools. So even if you think it's the most natural thing in the world that you've done, please record it, because it mightn't be natural to everyone. And I think what we're trying to look at here is capturing best practice, capturing ideas that we can share beyond this room. The other point that was brought coming from this side of the room just links to this final point. This year is the first year where our inspectors, the annual inspections, they were and should have been asking questions around your firstly your preparation, your use of previous data, but also your planning for future assessments and the long term. The suggestion was make sure, as in everything you do for these inspections, that you build an evidence file over time, not just as part of your self-evaluation or immediately prior to a visit, but build up this case file, build up this history of what you have done, who's been assessed, anything you think that is important here, any modifications you've made, record it in your file and use that as a starting point for discussion. Here's what we've done. Take it away, review it. If you have any questions, come back to me later, but lead the inspector rather than being challenged by the inspector. So give it to them on a plate and say, that's what we've done, happy to chat about it any time. So be on the front foot in terms of knowing that you've prepared well, positively for the students, which is ultimately what it's for, but also that we're covering ourselves in terms of the preparation that we've undertaken, and we don't leave it to chance. So build up your resource file, your evidence file. Again, it might feel something natural to everybody, but again, I think any tips or any feedback helps. So. Are there any other comments before we draw it to a close? Anything that people want to share, successes they've had, concerns they've had, and ideas for taking this forward?
One of the biggest things that OECD are doing is looking at ways of enhancing how they deliver the tests and administer the tests to be more intuitive in terms of students' understanding of skills. I suppose the biggest question that I've got is how can we as a school be one step ahead of them in making sure that we're preparing the students in the right way for the tests that are going to be devised for the next round, which could well be quite different to the tests that we've just had. Is there any collective mechanism that we could have in terms of intelligence gathering as like a central point that could disseminate what's happening to schools in Dubai as a whole, so that we could actually prepare in the right way for what's coming?
I think we could definitely engage with OECD and actually be on the front foot, and whether that be through KHDA and representative schools, but that we share it. It's not kept closed, that we're well prepared. I know one of the aspects is the development of problem solving. Rather, it is a big feature of the way that OECD is going. And there are big discussions about the validity of their assessments as they currently stand. So we know that, yes, it's on our agenda, possibly rightly so, but OECD themselves are being challenged by the nature of the assessments they have. So there is a big question to be asked there, but I think the point is again about engagement. If we wanted to go out and work with them on what is the direction you're taking so that we're well informed, that would suit us all well.
I actually think there's another context there, David. It sounds a little bit sneaky, but we are representative of a global educational community. Our eyes and ears will pick up things from the far corners of the globe, and we need one person to come back to with any information we found, and he happens to be the only person standing up in this room at this time.
You've been volunteer.
I will volunteer, I don't mind. It'll get me out of another job, which I almost got volunteered for earlier. So,
but seriously, we have contacts worldwide. If there's anything that goes out there, we've got to listen, record it, and get it back to one point, and then it goes out to the educational community.
Having been volunteered, and I don't think I've got any option other than to say, if you do hear anything about developments with OECD, PISA, TIMSS, etc., I can gladly be a conduit for the wider community, and we'll share any updates in these sessions. I suppose that's given me also my summer homework now. Thank you, table to my right here. Are there any other points that aren't going to get me into trouble or more work than I already have?
One thing that we really wanted to know is how are the students being selected, because I know that there are certain schools like in Singapore, they are very selective of who they put forward for the TIMSS test, knowing from my colleagues. But here yet, we were given a sample of the students that were selected were not our best lot. In the larger interest of Dubai, I think it's very important that we see how we're selecting our students. Our schools being given the choice of who they're putting forward for these kind of TIMSS, these type of tests, which is like worldwide.
We had this discussion last time around. My understanding is that the samples are genuinely random. But what has happened is that at school level, so at the micro, where you might have 40, 50 students, they could be slightly skewed. We found, for example, this year, and we're prepared for this now, that we made sure we analysed the students who were taking the assessment in terms of their performance in all other academic areas. And we found that they were slightly, sorry, for TIMSS, they were actually a very well-represented cohort, maybe slightly to the positive. But our PISA cohorts were slightly to the negative. They reflected the school less than positively, if you like, although the outcomes might not show that. But we're at least knowing who the candidates are and what their performance levels are. So, again, for our defence, with the inspectors, that we can actually put a case forward to say why trends might have happened. What we were confident last time when we did this was that there might be slight skews at school level, because of the nature of the sample, but that sort of levelled itself out across the population of Dubai. So where one school might be slightly higher, but actually the way the sample is drawn, I believe it is a randomly generated sample, Dr. Abdullah. It's
random.
It's random. You can't within that randomness you can't help but have occasional skew factors when the sample is small in a particular school. But I think as a population it tends to level itself out. It's back to the point made earlier. Have your preparation documented, have your sample, your cohort documented, and the analysis to support why they might have achieved very well or why this particular cohort might have underachieved, so that your preparation is not questioned. You've done everything you possibly can, but the randomness of the sample is what has impacted your outcomes. So I don't know if that answers.
No, that's right. That's the way we prepare.
Sort of sitting on the fence.
On our defence.
I suppose what's interesting in what you're alluding to, though, is that you've got colleagues in Singapore that are telling you that that's not what they do.
That's right, exactly. And I'm a testament to. I've actually been on top of my principle with this, because in Singapore they're very selective about who they are putting forward for this TIMSS test.
I couldn't comment, wouldn't comment, but we might have
sorry
eyes and
if
ears
any-
in Singapore
if you-
who could comment on that in the future.
They do.
We hear about
There's
it.
lots,
Yeah.
especially if it's a bench
We
assessment like this.
We probably won't record that in our
Yeah,
findings,
I'm not
just
putting
to-
it down
just to
here,
use.
but I'm just letting this
No, I don't know.
the Dubai colleague know that things like this could happen.
I think in the spirit of fairness, if we're doing a random sample, we're doing the right thing. If others are doing it otherwise, then so be it for them, their consciences.
Doing the right thing is good, but it sounds like a good idea.
No, but this is, if it is such an important agenda for Dubai, it does bring up a lot of questions about how things are done, And I think something like this needs to be studied forward.
Yeah. It's other people need to speak more about it.
There are questions that can be asked. We can get our eyes and ears on the ground just to find out.
What's
Is it fair and representative? But that shouldn't diminish from the fact that we're doing it fairly, or as fair as we can within our parameters of 13, 14, 15 different curricula and so forth.
I think what we need to see is, are we the only country doing it fairly? If Singapore is doing that, eyes and ears on the ground, are other countries doing it as well?
Let's assume they are for now until we're proven otherwise.
That's what we
So-
need to know, because how are students being selected?
I suggest we're getting a task force together here, not only me. So I think there'll be a group of us trying to source this information. So I'll be glad to put a group together if you've got any findings that support those aspects. But I think what we concentrate on is what is within our control. So if we look back at where we were, if we can generate the ideas of best practice that we can share amongst each other, take that forward, and actually not really care about what everybody else is doing. I know you could say it's a competition, we're going to be wrong, but as long as we can do the very best that we're doing, be true to ourselves, then at least we're not open to any question, and leave the rest. Although I feel somebody's going to challenge me on that point now. So,
No, I think, but that's right. In our own spirit, that's the fair way of doing it. We're doing the right thing, but it's also for tests like this and things like this that is happening, needs to have a bigger forum to discuss, what's happening.
I think that's part of the engagement
how
with OECD.
how the selections are being done in schools,
If we have the engagement that we're seeking with OECD and others, then that might be a topic that could be raised in terms of.
Maybe if I may add over here something which my colleague is just mentioning. There are many of these British schools, we follow the CIE curriculum and the stream selection happens in 9. Now the children, when they enter into year 9, they are already into the commerce stream or the science stream. So until year 8, certainly they study the sciences, but when they come to 9, from the beginning, from September onwards, they are not studying, that subject in particular. And by the time the TIMS happens, which happened in March, those children were a little disconnected with the subject. Though we did take the measures and we had that additional lessons with them, but that was a problem which I don't know, maybe some other schools also might have faced.
Could the flip be true that, on balance, that those that were in the science stream were actually better prepared than, but again, so it balances out. So you've got some students who might not be as prepared as well because they're in the commerce stream, but you've got some students that actually by accessing the science stream would be possibly stronger, and actually on norm it levels out.
Yes.
I wonder, I don't know.
Yes, they were better. But then since it was the random selection, so there was certain, in that list when we had, there were children who
That's why I think that the randomness is across the UAE, I think.
Yes.
But again, back to the point, have your analysis of your cohort, so that when you can discuss with inspectors why certain results are not as they might seem, there's your justification. It's not through anything that you have done, it's actually just the nature of the sample that was taken.
David, sorry.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, it strikes me that thinking about setting people up to succeed rather than setting people up to fail, if we're going to be having DSIB inspectors coming into our schools next year, would it not be a useful thing to have a half day or a day, primarily for principals, to which all schools in Dubai were expected to be represented? A session here at the KHDA to say, look guys, this is what we're asking you to do, this is what you need to be working on, etc., etc. This is what David and his working group have got to report back from their little jaunt over to Singapore or whatever's happened. We have a session, so we're setting schools up to succeed right at the beginning of the academic year. And I know people like myself would really appreciate that, not just learning from people who knew more than I did, but also learning from people coming from other schools. So, as we've just been doing in the previous session, that we would be sharing ideas and practices. So we're setting ourselves up to succeed as a team.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but I think actually looking at, our idea is here looking at best practice, but we could argue that we're not as well informed as we would like to be, and we're talking about aspects globally that we don't have a firm handle on. So I think yes, any greater information and more widely shared would benefit us all.
Yeah, no, we don't.
When the last TIMS report was delayed,
I'm not.
a lot of schools had enough information about their cohorts from the 2012 TIMS to what they appeared for now. Schools had enough information, and one of the key strengths that in practice that I find that has really helped is ensuring that school assessments are rigorous and they're well defined, but at various year groups we ensure that we have standardized assessments, which give us both those points: assessment methods, measures of progress against the various domains.
That's similar to the point that was made on the far table, that if we have support, whether it be from HDA or elsewhere, over the next few years to develop these standardised domain-focused assessments, even if there's subsets, but they bring familiarity, it links in as well with the changes in direction for OECD, if we're on the front foot in terms of preparing for that. But I think bigger than that is that we build in these type of activities into our curriculum, so that we're not just looking at teaching to the test, but they're getting these experiences. But the assessment, you're absolutely right, we need to know what we're assessing.
And it gives good feedback. It gives, and it's standardized against age expectations, against year groups expectations.
I think it's exactly these points that were brought up.
Both those points, very, very valid. If schools which have worked very rigorously on these 2 points in the last 3 years will definitely see good outcomes in the actually experiencing good outcomes on a regular basis with their students. But in terms of meeting Dubai targets, I'm sure.
I think the feedback is absolutely right.
Yes.
But we wait a year and a half to get some generic feedback And it's difficult to use that in a more focused manner. Whereas if you're getting more timely feedback and focused per student, per cohort, however you want it, it allows you to have a greater impact in a more timely manner. 100% agree. Whether we can work towards that, that's an aspiration, but please do record it. And similar to your comment about Arabic, it's exactly the same challenge. If we've not got the standardised benchmarks that we can work to and give feedback, we're sort of fighting in the dark, if you like. So,
yeah, I mean, as far as English, maths and science is concerned, we have enough resources to acquire these standardized assessments. But in terms of Arabic, obviously,
big a challenge.
that's a bigger challenge.
I'll close now if people don't mind, unless there's anything to add. I'll thank you for your time. I say the session's been really about your feedback, so I look forward to reading it all. And if people are interested, we'll find a mechanism to share it before the end of the academic year. Yeah? June is it? Excellent. Thank you very much. If you leave the papers on the table, please. Thank you for this. It's your session. But please do leave the papers on the table. They're no good to me if you walk away with them. So leave the feedback session.